I'm just recording the session as well for us, so whoever has missed it is able to catch up. So firstly, I just want to share my screen very quickly. Okay. So today's session is going to be a full support session. So in support of assignment 2, and any questions that you guys have around it. I think I can actually cover a lot of the questions that you guys may have in this session based on the presentation that I put together. If I have to give you any more information, I'll basically be answering the assignment for you. So just pay attention, ask questions that's relevant, and then we can keep going. So one of the questions in our last session was, how do you do applications specifically? So I think I took question 3.2 from assignment 1, and I just put the question there. So it's basically, the question is, when deciding on a supplier, there's a checklist that Technova, so Technova was our case study, will need to use to ensure that they evaluate the suitability of their supplier. Discuss 4 key factors that Technova will need to consider when selecting a supplier. So the rubric specifically, they didn't exactly tell you that 8 marks was theory or 12 marks was application, but just so that you have more of an indication of how you would go about answering a question that doesn't give you a breakdown rubric. So for 20 marks, how you would normally work it out is most times 2 marks is theoretical, which means that you need to provide at least 2 theory points based on the 4 key factors. So the 4 key factors specifically was product, technology and process technology, quality was one of them, capacity was another one, reliability as well. So there was a few that was in the textbook as theory. So it's nice to basically give at least 2 different points. So for quality specifically, it would be, items should be of high and consistent standard. It needs to basically affect the overall standard of a finished product. And that's cited directly from your textbook. And then give another point in terms of how quality contributes towards you selecting a specific supplier. When you talk about applications, so your application will be 3 marks per key factor. So that gives you a total of 12 marks for all 4 key factors. So for your 3 marks, you're going to speak specifically on Technova and why Technova basically chose that specific supplier. So for instance, if quality is one of the key factors that Technova should consider, they need to understand the overall quality of the products that they're purchasing, whether it's their screens, their motherboards, their camera lenses. So go into as much detail as possible in respect to the case study in question. So if your quality is not up to the industry standards, your customer may, purchase from a competitor, that means you replace the smartphone on a regular basis because the components are going to disintegrate a lot faster. It may not be as resistant as your competitors because your competitors are using products from suppliers that's of higher quality. And if your smartphone or your quality of your components for that specific smartphone is better, it will drive your customer to purchase a cell phone from you. It's going to be a lot more reliable, a lot more durable. So it goes along that line. What I do like to see further to this is you specifically bringing in an external I'd say case study or an example. Like for instance, if we're speaking on smartphones specifically, bring in a case study for Apple or for Samsung, for instance, where they speak about how the different suppliers that they would use, or the quality of their products that they manufacture. So bring in similar case studies of how you can relate to those key factors, and how they need to consider their different suppliers when they're selecting it. Okay, so make sure, like, what I saw a lot in assignment 1 specifically was when a question like this came up, some students were putting in a little bit of a definition of what quality is, and then just going into saying Technova should select a supplier that is of high quality, that can meet their standards, so they can build their revenue as well as their profitability, because customers would rather purchase from them than their competitors. So that basically gives you 1 mark for theory and 1 mark for application. You're getting 2 out of potentially 5 marks, and that's where you're sort of losing marks. So make sure that you are providing enough information to cover the question specifically according to what the rubric or that marking guideline is. Okay, is there any questions so far? Okay, I see no questions so far. Okay, so that's the first one. Then there was a question on the ICE task 4 and the use of DMAC. This is on page 104. Okay, it's part of Six Sigma, which is part of total quality management, and DMAC is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. This is the illustration of how DMAC is basically formed. Your case study or your ICE task is based on ABC Logistics. ABC Logistics, you now need to understand they're having X, Y, and Z problem. You now need to basically evaluate their problem. Use assumptions, because there isn't a lot of assumptions being provided to you. So it's me trying to gauge your creativity when you are answering a question like this. So what is the problem? Define it. How are you going to measure it? Through KPIs. How do you now analyze your different KPIs? What is your grading? What is your marking? What is your solution of how you're going to improve? And how are you now going to take that solution for that problem and analyze it even further? Is the process working? If it's not, how do I now sustain it going forward? So that's basically in a nutshell what your DMAC is. And this is basically how you're going to answer your case study that's relevant to Six Sigma or DMAC. Okay. Is there any questions so far? Whilst we're on ICE Task 4 and speaking about it, if you have not submitted ICE Task 1 to 3 already, make sure that you do all of your ICE tasks and have it submitted by latest the 12th of May. I will only be grading all of those ICE tasks on the 12th of May. Your results will be posted on the 14th of May, the latest. The reason is I'm getting bits and bobs of ICE tasks that's being submitted. And it's difficult for me to know, once I've finished grading a specific group, who submitted it at a later stage. So I'm now going into sequence, and I'm going to make sure that I mark each and every one of your ICE tasks. So on the 12th, everyone will be graded. Your marks will reflect on the 14th of May. Okay. Also, PASS has been updated. So your exam timetable is updated as well. Make sure you go and check that and prepare yourself for your, I think it's an unseen examination for this module. Yes, it is. Make sure you are preparing yourself. Our last live lecture that we have, I'm going to do a full session like we're going to do today. But this is based on past exams. So what I like to do in the last session is pull out the last 3 years of examinations, and I pull out key sort of factors where I think you should be concentrating on. I'm not telling you this is what's coming out in the examination, because I don't see the examination ahead of time. You actually see it before I do. So what I'm going to do is just give you a bit of a revision, just so you understand some of these key concepts before you walk into that exam room. Is there any questions so far before we move on to assignment 2? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we now gone into assignment 2, and I broke down every single question. So whether it is the marking matrix, how you're going to get your maximum mark, the sort of information you need to provide, etc. So the first one, question 1.1, is explaining how information sourcing and inventory would function as supply chain drivers for Brightech. Okay, they're already giving you 3 of the drivers that they want you to now explain. So information sourcing and inventory. If I'm not mistaken, the question also further asks you to use or incorporate some of the other drivers in your answer. So try and do that as well. So there's 5 marks for every driver. So there's a total of 3 drivers and a total of 15 marks. Your 3 drivers are going to be information, sourcing, and inventory. And when we speak about inventory, we want to talk about, the different materials, whether it's a finished good, whether it's a raw material, that's part of your supply chain, how your raw materials are purchased, what is the different process. So everything that drives and sort of completes your supply chain, that's what we're going to be looking for. Whether it is something that's a work in progress, whether it's maintenance, whether it's, finished goods, anything that forms part of the supply chain from an inventory perspective, that's what you need to explain theoretically. So what I would say here, 5 marks for each driver, 2 marks is going to be speaking on theory, 3 marks is going to be speaking on application. So you now need to use inventory as a supply chain driver and basically put the scenario together with Brightech and link it both together. Okay. The next one will be information, which is basically the glue that allows the supply chain drivers to work together. You can incorporate the other drivers into information, for instance, because you need a chain to be completed, and information from basically the other drivers is pulled together as forming that link in your supply chain. So you need to have that chain working together with the end goal of how do you get a resilient supply chain. And use these keywords: effectiveness, efficiency, resilience. This is all part of supply chain, and how you keep your supply chain motivated and working is you using these type of words and terminology. And then the last one, it's sourcing. It's how do you get a supplier that is strategic, that is competent, of high quality, because it has a direct impact on your business, your product, and also your competitiveness in the market. You want to have a strategic partner that is part of your business, an integral part of your business, so that when you start with production, if you are manufacturing or producing a product, they form a very big part of it. And you can call on to a supplier from a sourcing perspective if you need to complete the link in your supply chain. So that means, whether you are purchasing or sourcing products, raw materials, as a just in time. So you need a product there just basically when the next portion of the step is now completed. So you need to now understand when you need your product. Are you now buying in bulk? If you buy in bulk, you now have a lot of cash flow sitting in inventory, which is also how you can now relate sourcing and inventory together. So you need to be talking about this. So I hope what I'm saying actually, you're sort of finding how everything fits together and how you can have a very cohesive essay speaking about your supply chain drivers, because everything basically relates to each other, and everything, one cannot function without the other, basically. Okay. Is there any questions about 1.1?
Ma'am, I would like for you to repeat the thing that makes up our 5 marks. It was 2 marks application, and then I didn't hear the other 2.
Okay, so most times it will be 2 marks theory, 3 marks application, especially when there's a 5 mark per task or 5 mark per driver or risk or benefit, whatever question is basically asked of you. And if it is for 5 marks, most times 2 marks is theory and 3 marks is application. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Is it in point form?
I would say if you are, like, say, for instance, let's look at question 1.1, right? One of your drivers is information. I don't mind for information to be in point form. But when you're speaking about it theoretically and you're doing an application, it's very difficult to put it into theory because all it means is you're just making a point for a mark. You're not actually making a flow with your content. So I would like it to be in paragraph, but whatever is easier for you. It also, it needs to read well to the person reading it. But I would say information in bullet form to make it easy, and then your rest of your work in paragraph. Ideally, that's what I would like to see.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, which is question 1.2. And basically the question is saying that Brightech is launching a plan to improve its processes and restore its brand reputation. Considering logistics as a key element, explain the concept of logistics within the context of Brightech's supply chain management for 5 marks, okay? Now, with this question specifically, number one, you need to read and understand this case study. You have to read this case study 5 to 10 times for you to actually grasp keywords and key elements within the case study that can help you when you're answering question 1 right down to question 4, right? When we're speaking about explaining the concept of logistics, you need to basically explain first what logistics is. Because me as the reader, let's say we have a moderator that's not part of supply chain, they don't understand what logistics is. So you now need to explain what logistics is, and that's where your theory comes into play. You then use your application, like speaking about the time, the place, the benefits of logistics to Brightech specifically. And if need be, bring in an example. Bring in an example of, let's say, let's use another company like a Samsung, for instance, or even Apple. I mean, these are like tech companies. You want to use something that's very similar to the question that, or the case study that is now being posed to you. And you want to bring examples of how do their logistics work. Is there a specific time? Is there a specific place? What is the benefit of the logistics to that company specifically? So research it. I know some questions are asking you to bring in external sources or use external sources that's outside of the textbook. Take that into account because it is very justifiable when we are marking and grading your assignment that we look for external sources. If I'm only seeing Mbaje in your referencing in a specific question, and I know that you need to use external sources outside of the textbook, I won't give you a mark for it because you need to be following the instruction that's been posed to you. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, logistics, there is a big theory paragraph on what logistics is, the different benefits of logistics, etc., in the textbook. So use it, understand it, use the PACER. And I put the PACER there for a reason, because it's isolating which paragraph the content is sitting in. I didn't go as far as page numbers. If I do go as far as page numbers, I'll basically be answering the assignment for you. But it's in those specific chapters that I've given to you or those specific learning units that's there. Okay. Then we're going to go to question 2.1. So Brightech basically has been contemplating international purchasing. So this is basically importing some of their items to help mitigate the quality issues that they've been experiencing. So conduct additional research and discuss 2 key risks that Brightech may experience if they go ahead with this course of action for 10 marks. So they're asking you for 2 risks at 5 marks each for a total of 10 marks. And this is purely in the textbook as well. And some of the risks you're talking about is if you have to think for yourself and completely layman's terms, take yourself out of supply chain and put yourself into general knowledge. If you are somebody that is starting your own business and you're now looking for suppliers for your business, if you look at someone from a local perspective compared to someone from a global perspective, you now need to look at from a communication. Let's say you're importing or deciding to import from China. There's a culture and communication barrier. So, which is probably one of the biggest obstacles. So you need something that's going to bridge that gap, especially when it comes to cultural differences between yourself as well as the person that is now selling that product to you. So you need to understand what the ethics are of that country, the different cultures, what obstacles is basically on board if you have to look at importing from that specific country. So culture, communication, a huge risk. Another risk can be delays. You can't foresee, if, for instance, if you are getting let's say a 20-foot container of product, and your freight forwarder is giving you a timeline of 30 days, and there's commotion happening at the Red Sea, and there's commotion happening at the ports in South Africa, your 30-day timeline then becomes 60-day timelines. So you need to anticipate that delays is a huge sort of risk if you are looking at importing your products. If you are buying from a local supplier, you can pick up the phone today, pay for your item, and have it delivered in like 2 to 3 days. So it's now comparing all those risks and also looking at it from a Brightech perspective of how that risk can affect them as a business. Okay. Is there any questions? And very similarly here, 5 marks per risk. Speak about your risk, whether you choose it to be a culture and communication risk, something that's from a procurement perspective, the delays, as I spoke about, from a logistics side, or inventory risk, from a quality perspective, you can't always, prepare yourself for what quality you're going to receive, especially if you're importing it. Whether there's intellectual property risk, meaning you've got an idea or a specific brand and you're now selling it to a supplier in China for them to do manufacturing and for you to import the item in, and they decide that they want to manufacture and sell to 5 different companies. So these are sort of the risks that you're now looking at. So understand the risk, give me a definition for 2 marks, and then apply it to Brightech for 3 marks. It's as simple as that. Okay, any further questions here? Okay, just want to check. Nothing. It's opening the chat. Okay, I'll jump to comments just now in the chat box, all right? Okay, next question. Here we go. So next question. So question 2.2 is South Africa has legislation and frameworks in place to support the procurement industry. Discuss the legislative framework of local production and content and how it relates to Brightech. So explain how trade and industry basically in South Africa works. What is their role within the country? What do they support? What do they find risky? Understand and analyze that information and relate it to Brightech and what Brightech wants to do. So for theory, we're looking at 6 marks. For application, we're looking at 4 marks in this question specifically, okay? And there's a whole chapter a good few pages on legislation and framework. I'm not going to go through the content of it because it is quite theory driven, with the different policies, with procurement preferential policies, etc. So look at all of these things. The chapters provided to you in the PACER. Make sure you find the relevant act or the relevant legislation that relates directly to BrightTech. And from there, discuss how it impacts them, the role of Department of DTI, what DTI is, if you want to go as far as that. And find examples. If you want to find a company that where DTI has basically stopped the production because or stopped the import of a product because they're looking at it from a local production perspective, you can mention that. We want to see as much creativity as possible, and bringing in external examples actually shows that you've gone the extra mile to research and to further engage with different examples. That's outside of the textbook and outside of the case study as well. Okay, question 2.3. A state-owned, not-for-profit company, Help Together, wants to buy small home appliances from BrightTech. One of the pillars of procurement that exists in South Africa is open and effective communication. Discuss this pillar and how it affects Help Together and BrightTech. So this was one of the questions that we've had, and the answer is they've told you that the pillar is open and effective communication. So you're discussing this pillar. If there is another pillar, like for instance, I think it was value chain. But if you want to bring in value chain into how it affects communication, bring it in. But specifically for this question, they're telling you to discuss this pillar. So how is open and effective communication affecting Help Together, which is the nonprofit organization, as well as BrightTech? So you want to talk about how you want something that's transparent and competitive, something that's cost effective in terms of different communication styles. You want to be able to understand where open and effective communication is sitting between the two, Help Together and BrightTech, and how to basically explain it from a theory perspective and then apply it to Help Together and to BrightTech. Okay. Okay, next question. Question 3.1. Quality management seems to be an issue that's hindering the success of BrightTech. Conduct research beyond your prescribed textbook and explain what quality is in the context of BrightTech. So it says here a direct quote will not be marked, meaning you would have to then change it into your own words, and you need a reference from a credible source outside of your specific textbook. So for this question, can I just ask everyone to mute themselves? So you want to explain what quality is, in terms of the customer. You want to understand how a business has to make decisions about the different levels of quality, and what the business's aim is for its customer. You want to speak about the different principles of you want to do it right the first time. You want to have exceptional communication with your customers so you can meet their requirements. At the end of the day, quality management is there purely so that you can meet your customers' requirements and you can fulfill them and satisfy your customer. Okay. So explaining, number one, theory-wise, what is quality management? From your textbook, 1, from an external source, 2. How your application is going to work to BrightTech from a quality management perspective. And it's going to be very similar to question 1.1, I think, where you bring in quality, and whether it's from a sourcing perspective, whether it's quality to your final customer, you can use it in your discretion. You're going to apply it to BrightTech though. Okay. Also, external examples, more than welcome here as well. Okay, then we're looking at question 3.2, and it says explain 3 principles that Brightech would need to be aware of to ensure that they design a meaningful quality assurance process. Provide an example that's related to Brightech for each of those principles. So 3 principles at 5 marks each. And you're going to be looking at 3 marks each for theory and 2 marks each for an example. Okay, I hope you guys understood that. So 5 marks per principle. And from that per principle, you're going to have 3 marks for theory and 2 marks for examples. So there's a lot from the different 8 principles. And the 8 principles of quality management specifically is coming from your ISO accreditation, so your International Standards Organization, which we know is a management standard that allows a business or shows a business how to conduct itself, whether it's from a working perspective, whether it's understanding your suppliers, whether it's understanding your customers. You want to prevent non-conformity as much as possible. So I'm basically giving you an introduction to your 3.2 right now. Then you're going to go into your different principles. So there's 8 principles in total. Whether you decide to go into having a customer focus where your business is dependent on its customer. So it's basically necessary that you need to understand your customer's needs, their wants, what their requirements are, how do you now exceed their expectation. So that now, if you're choosing customer focus, I've already given you 1 mark just with an explanation. So you now need to expand on that. Then you need to go into how Brightech is basically, what are they doing in order for them to understand what the needs of their customer is. And then marry that together to give you examples or an application. Whether you want to talk about involving different people, let's say it's different stakeholders in a business, whether it is investors that's investing in Brightech. I'm not telling you that this is what's happening, but the different stakeholders that's involved in the business, whether it's top management, middle level management, senior management, how basically everybody is involved in the business to ensure that the employees are on the same goal basis. They understand what the goals are, the objectives are of the business, and they basically use their full ability and skill to achieve those goals and values that's set out by Brightech. So explaining your theory first and then putting it in application to Brightech. Okay. So we're only choosing 3 principles here. Don't give me all 8 principles. I will go for the first 3 principles. So make sure you're spending enough time understanding, explaining, and applying your 3 principles. No use you giving me 8 because I will only look at the first 3. Okay. Then we have the big baby of the assignment, which is your essay question. Okay. So in a report, okay, and a report means that it should have an introduction, it should have a body, and it should have a conclusion. The rubric, which I'll go through, is broken down into, do you have structure? Do you have a sound argument? These are sort of things that I look for. And if you don't have that basic, you're losing 5 marks already. Okay, so you now need to explain what total quality management is and why it would be beneficial for Brightech to implement a system. Include the following in your report. Number 1, you need to unpack the definition. So what is total quality management? You need to understand that it is a way of managing a business so that every job and every process is done correctly. Every person in the organization is following it, and you're getting it right the first time and every time. You're not going backwards trying to fix something, because then you don't have a good TQM process. So you want to understand how you can manage quality, the different systems. If you want to bring in different scenarios like Six Sigma, etc., bring it in. so everyone can understand it together. So number one, unpack your definition. Number two, you need to understand what the principles are of TQM specifically. So understanding the different principles, the different characteristics, how does it now benefit a business? Okay. Also, bring in external examples. So it says here, instruction, include an introduction, body paragraph, and a conclusion, right, which I've mentioned already. Include clear and relevant examples, right? You have to provide examples. It is very, very important. It's not just a theory essay. It is an application-based essay. Reference, according to a Harvard style, available on the library's website. I need to also, and I did discuss this in our first national support session, in-text referencing is absolutely important. If I see that your essay or your assignment has staggered in-text referencing, meaning you have in-text referencing in question 1.1, and then the next in-text referencing you have is in question 4, I automatically subtract 5% from you because it's showing me that you're having minor errors. If you have no in-text referencing at all, that becomes minus 10%. So make sure that you are referencing it correctly. When you are submitting it on Turnitin, check your plagiarism percentage. An acceptable plagiarism percentage where I don't really stress too much about it is less than 10%. If it's more than 10%, I open an originality report for your assignment and I go and I check where your 10% or more than 10% is sitting. If it's sitting in like headings or in your referencing or in your cover page, I don't stress about it because those are certain things that you can't reference correctly. However, if it's sitting in content and in theory and it's heavily sitting there, then we look at minor errors and minor reductions, which is then 5%. Okay, so very important. Use your rubric to answer your question. So this is 30-mark question. And it says here that you need to first explain TQM and the relevance to Brightech for 5 marks. So this is basically unpacking your definition, etc. Your main characteristics of TQM and how it would apply to Brightech. So you need to understand continuous improvement, for instance, everybody in your supply chain and partners and your different stakeholders need to have some sort of responsibility from a quality perspective, how everyone's basically functioning as a team, and sort of what is your sort of reverse logistics feedback. So if you are delivering a product to a customer, what is your customer's feedback on their satisfaction with regards to the quality of your product or the value of your product? You need to understand what this is because it's basically a very important part of whether your product is going to sell the next time around or not. So these are some of the characteristics. So you want to basically explain the characteristics. And I would say here, for main characteristics of the TQM and applying it to Brightech, to have at least 5 characteristics and then explaining it in relation to Brightech. So 5 marks for your characteristics, 5 marks for your application. Then we're going to go to the different drivers of TQM. You're going to speak about like just in time, for instance, understanding how you want to have 0 defects in your product. You want to minimize as much inspection costs. I will share on our group chat a video of Toyota and how they use different TQMs like just-in-time, Kaizen, Kanban, etc., and how they've incorporated it into something called TPS, which is Toyota's production system. And it'll basically show you, it's an illustration of how just-in-time works. And it'll give you an understanding. So when you are explaining it, you understand why just-in-time works for certain companies and doesn't work for other companies. You're going to speak about just-in-time. You're going to speak about Kaizen. Anything from a quality philosophy perspective, that's what you're going to speak on. So I would say here, probably look at having 2 to 3 drivers with the application to Brightech and how it's going to work if it's implemented at Brightech. And then the last one is we're going to speak about the benefit to Brightech and how they would adopt TQM. How is it going to help them, whether it's from a quality perspective so that they have full customer satisfaction to increase revenue and cash flow and profitability in their business. So those would sort of be the benefit to Brightech specifically. Okay, so that is your rubric broken down, and that gives you 10, 20, 25 marks. The other 5 marks, it's 2 marks that's coming out from a structure perspective. So making sure that you have a structure within your essay or in your report, and then 3 marks from an argument perspective. If you are just spitting out characteristics and spitting out drivers and spitting out benefits, and you don't have any application and there's no flow in your report, you don't get full marks on argument. Your argument needs to be like you are part of Toastmasters, you know, and you are hell-bent on explaining to me why Brightech needs total quality management in their business. That's what I need to see, and that's how you're going to score on your argument side. Okay. Is there any questions? Okay, there's a lot of hands up. Let's go. Who's first? Let's go with number 1 is Lee. Lee?
Hi, Narissa.
Hello.
I'm just coming back to question 2.3.
2.3. Let's go. Yeah.
So again, I'm asking, it shows open and effective communication.
Correct.
That's the pillar that I need to focus on specifically, because in the textbook it shows open and effective competition. And to my understanding, communication and competition
It's
is a
completely
double.
different. Okay. I didn't see the textbook that it said competition. Okay. Let me get back to you on this one, Lee. I'll get back to you literally when we cut this call, okay? And I'll
Okay,
just have
thank
a quick pause at that. I think also, you know, my mind, when I see open and effective, I also assumed it was communication and not competition. So let's, if we're saying, I would say it would be competition and not communication. Reason being is we need to follow what's in the textbook.
Okay,
But
thank you.
let me confirm with you the moment we cut this call, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shaquille?
Hi, ma'am. Sorry, man. Regarding the examples that we need to use in question 4, making use of examples, would we have to like use examples outside of the case study, or does this relate to application from the case study?
So it will be application from the case study, but examples from outside or external sources. Like, for instance, I gave you an example on the TPS, or Toyota Production System, using just-in-time, Kaizen, Kanban. Those are all drivers of total quality management. I've already given you one example of how the drivers of TQM has benefited Toyota. So you just need to do obviously a little bit more research around it and say, okay, how has it benefited Toyota? Has it cut the timings down? Has it increased the assembly time? You know, cut down on manual labor and hours and overtime? You probably just need to go a little bit more in depth. But all I'm saying is try and provide maybe 1 or 2 examples in each breakdown, if that makes sense. So maybe one from a driver perspective and maybe one from a benefit perspective.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. There was one more hand up? I'm assuming that we've sort of answered it in the session already. Okay, so I owe you open and effective competition versus communication after this, which I will type out a message quickly on our WhatsApp group so you have that answer. And yes, Tumelo, you have a question.
Hi, ma'am. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm good, thank you. My question is with regards to the essay, right? Question.
Yes.
So, as we have like the criteria and basically the rubric, right? And it obviously has points and how much marks those or whatever explanation or things that we had to include into the essay, right?
Yes.
So, I want to ask, should the essay also be like, especially with the body, because most of the time the body is what has most of the information. Should we go like according to each point? So like we start with the explanation and then the main characteristics and then the drivers of TQM, or should we can do it in our own way as long as it flows?
As long as it flows. What I would like to say, though, what would be nice when you're looking at it from an essay perspective, have your introduction. If you want to call it introduction, call it introduction. Then your body comes into play. When it does, you want to speak about what TQM is. So you want to always start off with a definition so that your marker or your moderator is aware of what you're trying to unpack. Then you're going to go into these are the main characteristics of TQM, and this is the reason why it would, this is how it does now apply to the company we speak here about, which is Brightech. These are the drivers, so just in time, Kanban, Kaizen, whatever it is, and then you speak about how it's going to benefit Brightech. And if you want to put those in point form, so do your definition and then have a paragraph after that. Then call it characteristics and have, 5 paragraphs after that. Then call it drivers, maybe have 2-3 paragraphs after that. And then benefits, and have 2-3 paragraphs after that. So that's what's going to have a little bit of a flow. It also makes it very easy to read. And you're now not just looking for information in different places. It flows and it's answering the question that's being asked.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. Nshlan Kanipo, I'm sorry if I butchered your name.
That's okay. My question is a bit different, but I'm trying to understand, is it possible to do this assignment without the textbook? Because at the moment, I don't have a textbook. I placed an order, and I was away for 2 weeks. When I came back to collect, they told me it clicks, it's already picked up again by the courier. Now I'm trying to place an order on Iowa, it doesn't allow me, it's showing. So I don't know what's the way forward.
It's very difficult to do the assignment without the textbook because you need a lot of the theory from the textbook. However, go back to the slides that I've done and I've shared with you over the last 6 learning units. And the drivers I mentioned there, the characteristics I mentioned there, that sort of thing. And you can reference it because that's the information that I've pulled from the textbook. And that's just helping you temporarily. Because sometimes what happens is if you go onto Google and you Google the benefits of TQM, it may give you what Google's idea of the benefit is and not actually what in supply chain the benefits are.
That's
okay.
True.
So use the slides and use the theory there. It's going to take you a lot more research to put the theory together with the, with the headings, but it helps you at least.
Okay.
Okay, so use the slides and reference the slides, the information you're getting from the slides on your, as the textbook, because I've gotten that information from the textbook. Okay. Okay, Luke.
Evening, ma'am. I'd just like to know if you can possibly go back to question 1.2 and 1.1 and 1.2.
Sure.
I just want to see the mark allocation.
Okay, so 1.1 is for 15 marks. So that's 5 marks per driver. You have 3 drivers.
Okay, and on this, ma'am, will it be 2 for theory and 3 for application, or the other way around?
Yes,
Okay.
I would say 2 for theory and 3 for application.
Okay.
Okay, and 1.2 you said, this is for 5 marks. And I would say the same thing, 2 for theory, 3 for application.
Thanks, ma'am.
Okay. Perfect. Tumelo. Okay, hands down. Is there any other questions while we still have 10 minutes in the session?
Oh, sorry, ma'am. My mic was off.
Okay, no problem.
I wanted to ask, please do correct me if I'm wrong, right? So basically, theory is like having to explain, for example, maybe question 1.1, right? Theory is like having to explain what information is, and then the application is adding bright tech or like making examples based on like that information that you have explained.
Yes, so exactly that. So for instance, if we have to look at question 1.1, for 2 marks, you're going to explain what inventory is. You know, inventory is your materials, raw materials, your finished goods that form part of the business or part of your product and the supply chain. You're obviously going to do it for 2 marks. What I've given you now will probably be for a mark. Then for your 3 marks application, you're going to explain how inventory as a driver is related to Brightech or how it impacts Brightech. So maybe you're speaking about Brightech and how their inventory management is based on the case study. And you probably, if you cannot explain specifically or too much from there, bring in an added example. Bring in how inventory has affected another tech company or another appliance company, and that will just add in and basically, you know, give more juice to your answer. But don't just do a one-liner because the one-liner is not going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, no problem. Is there any other questions? Okay, all right, perfect. I will share this assignment to sort of support working with you. The recording, it normally takes about half an hour to 45 minutes to download. Once I have that downloaded, I will post it on YouTube for you to have that. And then I owe you open and effective communication versus competition, which you'll have in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Is there anything else that I can do for you? Okay. Well, all the best with the assignment, and just give it your best. Okay. Also, make sure that your ISAs are done by the 12th and posted. I have put the due dates for the 12th, and I cannot extend that any further. So just make sure that it's there. If you are stuck with any of the ISAs, just let me know. I have to apologize. I've been a bit distant from my WhatsApp messages. That's because I'm still on a little bit of a vacation. But we will. I'm better now, and I'm in the zone, and I will respond to you when you do send it. Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a lovely Workers' Day. And if you are taking Friday off, have a lovely long weekend. And I will chat to you hopefully during the course of next week. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.